Renault has quite an expertise when it comes to MPVs, but to launch their first MPV in India, they have summoned another Dacia, the Lodgy. Save for the Duster, the Dacia designs are known to be simple and conservative, and the Lodgy is no different, more so with its long and boxy silhouette. Renault has given it a striking face though, with a nice chrome-embellished grille with the lozenge bisecting the slats. There's a sharp chin too, which looks very Volkswagen-ish if you like, but adds appeal to the fascia. The swept-back headlamps look smart, and so does the contoured bonnet. But go aft and the design starts losing its charm. All the 5 doors are pretty flat with hardly any character lines on them to add any definition. The tail lamps, which look like a pair of jester hats dangling from the sides, may not appeal to everyone. The 15-inch wheels with the 185/65 section tires fill up the wheel arch as well, but look a tad too puny for a 4.5 meter long body. Even the receding roofline, the Renault typical chunky rub rails and the subtle creases over the wheel arches fail to take the attention away from the visual bulk of the MPV. But then the aim of this design is to highlight one thing and one thing only: cabin space. And there is oodles of it when you step inside. The dashboard will instantly remind you of the Duster, since the instrumentation cluster, the steering wheel, the gear lever, the air vents, the door handles, the aircon switches and the touchscreen infotainment system, they all come from the SUV. Even the front seats come from the Duster but don't rock every time you brake. They are comfortable even on long distance journeys. The second and third rows have quite a few customization options. Now this is the Lodgy 7-seater option, so you get captain seats in the middle row. Unfortunately, they can only be adjusted for recline, not for reach. Now this front driver's seat is completely set to my driving preference, and still there is decent amount of knee room. Foot space is quite good, under thigh support is also quite good, and the backrest, like I said, is quite good, and even the headrests are nice and adjustable. So overall, it's a very good setup. The Lodgy can be had with an 8-seater option as well, which puts a bench in the second row. The third row isn't bad either. Now generally I avoid getting into the third row of any MPV, but here it's not that bad. Now these seats are not very spacious, not very generous, but they're not bad. This is the kind of knee room that I have. The floor is quite high, so I can't really expect a very good under thigh support. This is how I need to sit, and this is how any adult would need to sit here. So I think this seat is good enough for only 2 adults or 3 kids. There is a third seat belt in here as well. 3 adults would be quite a bit of a squeeze and very uncomfortable on long distance journeys, but I think the windows are quite roomy, so you don't get that claustrophobic feeling in here. So the third room isn't that bad. The brown and beige interiors, they look quite good. And like the exteriors, even the interiors have a very simple yet smart looking layout. And that low cost Dacia engineering, that isn't evident at all. The steering feel is typical Dacia, but unlike the Duster, you don't have that constant kickback when you're negotiating bends. It is heavy, it is quite responsive, and out on the highway it feels really nice. In the city though, the weight might feel a little cumbersome. The Lodgy is being offered only with a diesel engine as of now. It is the same 1.5 litre K9K unit that you see on most Nissan and Renault cars sold in India. Like the Duster, this one is also being offered in the 85 and 110 PS tunes. The one that I'm driving right now is the 110 PS version. Unlike the Duster, it doesn't have that jerky low end when you're driving at city speeds. It has a very linear power delivery. There is a little bit of turbo lag under 2000 RPM, but once you know how to use the turbo to your advantage, you are going to love this engine. Be it the highway runs or your city commutes, there's plenty of power and torque, and you never feel that the engine is really struggling for anything. So in a nutshell, the Lodgy is a lot like the Duster to drive, with the additional seats, but without making that long length evident, and that is a very good thing. But is this car good enough to tackle this? The Innova is the undisputed king of the MPV segment, with a big engine, tons of space and the acclaimed Toyota reliability. Over the years, it has received plenty of updates to keep it going in the market. Though long in the tooth now, it is still a handsome MPV, but the overdone bling tells you that it is trying too hard to mask its age. Its versatile cabin has been the yardstick for every MPV that has followed it in the last decade, but none have been able to surpass it. The Lodgy comes close though. While the two are closely matched on seating space, the Innova has better comfort for the third row passengers, while the Lodgy has better shoulder room. The Lodgy's boot is 210 litres compared to the Innova's 300 litre capacity, but the Renault has a lower loading lip, making it easier to load cargo. Where the Lodgy trumps the Innova is with its ability to remove the third row entirely and bump up the cargo space to a whooping 1,861 litres with a flat floor. Too bad that it can't hold a motorcycle though.
So while the third row can be pulled off completely, that also means the driver can forget the passenger and the seat at the picnic spot.
The Lodgy is very car-like to drive and has a very generous glass house. What that translates into is good visibility for the driver, and for the passengers, it takes away that stuffy feeling that generally leads to motion sickness on long-distance journeys. Now, what contributes to this effect are these large windows and a slim A-pillar. But this A-pillar is also a matter of safety concern, because the Euro NCAP says that in a frontal or a side impact collision, the A-pillar and the roof suffers from heavy deformation. And that is the reason why the Euro NCAP has given this car a 3-star rating. And mind you, that rating is for the car with curtain airbags. This one only has the frontal airbags. The Innova doesn't get an Euro NCAP rating simply because it isn't sold in the European markets. With 2015 onwards, it gets the frontal airbags across the range, and the ABS is available on all but the base trim, which is a good move. The Innova also has a more commanding driving position. The Innova was known to have one of the most premium looking cabins of its lot, but now it's starting to look a little too old school and a little too busy with all these switches. There's also a lack of uniformity. There are different types of LCD screens here. There's one that is the touchscreen unit for the infotainment. There's one tiny LCD here in the instrumentation for the trip computers. There's additional one here for your distance to empty and of course the clock. And there's one more here for the AC unit. So like I said, a lack of uniformity there. The Lodgy, on the other hand, feels a lot more minimalistic. It doesn't look as busy as this, but still gets all the work done that the Innova does too. The Innova uses an old school 2.5 litre diesel motor. Now if you're the kind of person who subscribes to the ideology of no replacement for displacement, well, prepare to be surprised. Because both Honda and Renault are able to get almost the same kind of horsepower and torque figures as the Innova from their puny 1.5 litre engines. And the Renault Lodgy completely outclasses the Innova in this regard. Their engine not only feels more eager at both full throttle and part throttle, it's also smoother and returns better fuel economy as well. It reflects in our test figures too. The Innova managed to sprint from 0 to 100 km an hour in 17.6 seconds, while the Lodgy was a good 4.6 seconds faster to the ton. The Innova's engine is also quite noisy. Even at city speeds, when you're accelerating, you can hear that gravelly note constantly. The Renault's engine, on the other hand, feels a lot more refined. Another interesting aspect is when you are with 7 people on board and cruising at about 100 km an hour on the highway, the Innova needs to be at about 3000 rpm. The Renault Lodgy carries out the same feat at about 2500 rpm. What that translates into is a more relaxed engine that gives you better fuel economy. In our tests, the Innova managed to return an overall fuel economy of 11.8 km to a litre, while the Lodgy managed an impressive 14.6 km to a litre. After driving both the cars back to back, I can't help but say this. The Innova, despite being one of the most premium MPVs around, is starting to feel a little too utilitarian. The Renault Lodgy just come across as a very good package now. Despite being a Dacia, it still tends to feel a little more premium than the Innova. I think Renault has got a winner on their hands. The Innova is still a very strong package though, and it is not going to be easy contending with its strong after-sales service, market penetration and the worshippers of its reliability. Like the large families, even the cabbies love the Innova. But at the same time, they also vouch for the rock-solid build of Dacia cars and the easy-to-maintain K9K engine, thanks to the hordes of Logans and Veritos that are still running strong in the market. So the fight to the throne is going to be exciting. In the last decade, there have been plenty of pretenders to the Innova's throne, and now it looks like finally we have an MPV that can actually challenge the Innova on space, comfort and performance.